Good morning. In August 2023, this short inquiry was commissioned about strip searching of 3 women at one police station. So welcome to the launch of its report, almost in August 2024. The inquiry changed. We didn't change it. The public of Manchester changed it. As soon as it was announced, other women started to contact the Mayor's office to ask if we would hear about their experiences in custody too. And they were stories that could not be ignored. The terms of reference allowed for more people and, importantly, more issues, because the cases have brought out issues beyond custody into unnecessary and unlawful arrests. And we have looked at complaints and specifically how vulnerable victims of abuse are dealt with when they are in the firing line of Greater Manchester Police. So we agreed to take all these new people on and that we would hear from others, but we gave them just 2 weeks because this was supposed to be a short inquiry, so it was a short window. Importantly, 11 women came to us and 3 men, and we took them all on. I want to thank another 8 women who came to us via women's charities and who had similar complaints to the ones in the inquiry, but they were not prepared to let Greater Manchester Police know who they were when they complained. And because the police have to respond, I was unable to take them on. But I thank them for coming forward. In every case in this inquiry, I took a statement from the complainant and sent them to the police requesting all the information that they had. And the narratives in the report are a mixture of those 2 elements. The police have also had the whole report since February. I wrote it in January and have responded in detail, so none of the facts in the report can be seriously disputed. So the complaints went from 3 women strip searched in one police station to 23 and then back down to 14 in just a couple of weeks because of that problem with anonymity. Far from problems with one police station in Greater Manchester Police, the narratives raise problems at each and every police station in Greater Manchester, except, ironically perhaps, in the light of recent news in Bolton. Longsight was closed much of the time. The scrutiny of where these people were arrested also showed that these poor arrests occurred in almost every division of Greater Manchester Police, except, I think, 2. I'm grateful that Greater Manchester Police signed an information sharing agreement with the Mayor and, with a very few minor exceptions, kept to it. Importantly, I do want to thank the participants in this inquiry, many of whom visibly had to dig deep to tell me what had happened to them, not knowing what help I could be. There is a link to all of them to this launch, and I directly, therefore, thank each and every one of them for coming forward. I am immensely grateful, and I believe that the people of Manchester will be grateful as well. Though many of you have seen the report, but the public haven't. The 14 narratives are followed by chapters looking at the faults disclosed in arrest, custody, strip searching, complaints, and finally, domestic abuse and how it is dealt with when victims appear to be turned sometimes into defendants. The report's online. I'm going to summarise one story and then I'm going to refer briefly to a number of others. Sophie. Sophie is a middle-aged, highly professional school teacher. She was imprisoned, punched and strangled in July of 2022 by her violent partner. She called in the police, who arrested him, bailed him to stay away from her, but he didn't. She thought that by the time she had spoken to me last summer, he had broken his bail 100 times at least. However, the police put a high alert on her home, categorised him as a dangerous, violent DV perpetrator and her as a high-risk victim. That was July. In September, at 3:17 in the morning, there was a huge hammering on Sophie's door. She saw on the street 2 large black vans and a lot of flashing torches. She was terrified. She was arrested, for it was the police, for criminal damage based on the perpetrator saying, for the first time after he was arrested for assaulting her, that 14 months before she had kicked his wing mirror off his car. She was arrested for 2 other even more minor allegations, but neither of those ever saw the light of day after this arrest. But one of them was that she had bruised his arms on the day when he tried to strangle her. And I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, if someone tried to strangle me, I'd probably bruise his arms as well. She was made to undress and dress in her own home with a woman PC present, but she was still searched in the street, not in her house, and she was put into a cage in a riot van. A quick note about arrest. Unlawful unless necessary is the formula to remember. She, of course, offered no threat to anybody. She could have been asked to attend a voluntary interview to discuss this 18-month almost ago wing mirror, if indeed there was anything to investigate. So we looked to the custody sergeant at Cheadle Heath Police Station, who had to decide whether to authorise this detention. He did so. He wrote that her arrest was necessary to protect a vulnerable person. This was the police-designated highly violent domestic violence perpetrator from her, and he authorised her detention. I imagine that you're as bewildered by now as I am about these decisions, and I imagine that you're as troubled as hearing about them made me. She was detained for 11 hours. She told arresting officers that she was awaiting a hysterectomy. She needed medication to stop menstrual flooding, but she wasn't allowed to take it until a nurse came the next day, and she suffered huge menopausal bleeding. She needed help. She rang the cell bell for an hour before a male officer arrived, went away for another 20 minutes and brought her a sanitary towel, but she needed a change of trousers by then. She had to ask 3 more times for this kind of provision, and each time it was a male police officer. And on one occasion, the way she got attention was because it was the reviewing inspector who comes at a particular time to look at whether she should continue to be detained, and she asked him for further supplies. Now, according to the custody record, Sophie had been allocated a female welfare officer, but that female welfare officer probably was allocated, but she never appeared. She's not on the custody record, and Sophie saw no woman while she was in custody. Greater Manchester Police have said very clearly that they will always designate a female welfare officer, and clearly it needs to be done with greater rigour than was present on that occasion. Sophie told her police interview what I have told you, and she was bailed to stay away from the perpetrator, to avoid a threat to him. Indeed, she was bailed on exactly the same terms as he was bailed on, to keep away from her. The arrest and the detention advanced this inquiry into a wing mirror not one bit. 5 days later, the arresting officer hammered again on her door and offered her a caution, which she refused to take. Because she wouldn't take it, she was charged with criminal damage to a wing mirror in 2021. But happily, her barrister was able to talk to the Crown Prosecution Service, who dropped it because, and I quote the barrister, "It isn't in the public interest to let this man use you and the police to further your power over Sophie." Sophie told me that literally she thought her life was ruined. She will never trust the police again, and neither will her teenage offspring who were there. She has had treatment for PTSD as a consequence of this. She is terrified that they will come again in the dark and take her away and lock her up for 11 hours while she bleeds. She told me she has moved house from the shame of being searched and put into a cage in a riot van outside her front door as if she was a terrorist, and the caution The caution would have shown on a disclosure and barring search. She is a school teacher, as I said. That would almost certainly exclude her from any future teaching job. It is written on the back of the document that the officer presented to her that he will exclude her. And it's even arguable that it would have been an offence for Sophie to apply for another teaching job had she accepted that caution. Happily, she didn't, but it was a serious expectation from the officer, who was very forceful with her about that. There is a High Court case in which a teacher successfully sued police for wrongly arresting him, and that's because the arrest itself showed up on a disclosure and barring check. The expert evidence was that he wouldn't get another teaching job with that there, and his career was ruined. And do officers think of this when they go late at night to arrest somebody for what must have been, in any view, a trivial offence? Listening to Sophie's story, as I was with some women from the mayor's office, one of them said, "My goodness, I've been very naive." And I think she was saying, I thought the world worked in a more fair way than this. So, a woman traumatised by the man's behaviour in the first place, who is recovering from that but also quite ill, must have felt as if her whole world had tilted sideways. She certainly has told me several times that she bitterly regrets ever reporting this violent man because of what followed. So one looks bewildered, and then the bewilderment actually turns to fury. And you ask yourself, who comes into the police to lock away their brains and stash away their humanity and tick up another arrest? Is that what it's about? Job done? Remember, there are about 6 officers here in large vans going along with this. Who recruits, who trains, and whoever checks that they are exercising their quite enormous powers in a proper way. There is a marked lack of context, which I think you'll see in the next couple of cases. I mean, the next step, of course, is to second what the barrister has said and ask, why are the police aiding and abetting this controlling man to exact the most painful revenge he can inflict on his victim, because she will no longer put up with him? Clearly, all of this raises serious questions about culture. Let me consider much more briefly Maria. In 2023, she came to a Manchester hotel from Yorkshire with her partner for a charity event there. They had a disagreement. He beat her up. She screamed. Someone called the police. The partner fled. The police attended, and they arrested her partner from the family car and left with him. The next morning, Maria had very little money, no credit card, no car keys, no house keys which were in the car, all in his property on arrest. She can't drive home. She can't wait in the car for him. She has no idea where he is or what is happening. She has no contact number for the officer in the case. The victim code requires that every domestic abuse victim should be given a contact for the officer, but that hadn't happened in this case. So at 8 o'clock, she does all she can do and goes to the nearest police station to knock on the door, but there is no front desk at Pendleton Police Station.
Very good afternoon to you. It is 12 o'clock. You're watching Sky News today. We've been listening to Dame Vera Baird reporting on her investigation that's taken a year into Greater Manchester Police, and the report has found that officers at Greater Manchester Police were abusing their power, making unlawful arrests and unlawful and demeaning strip searches. We've been hearing the details of that from Dame Vera Baird. It involved investigating strip searches applying to 14 women, more than the initial 3 that had come to light following a Sky News investigation led by Jason Farrell. Earlier we heard from Andy Burnham, who said that he accepts Dame Vera's recommendations on various points, including seeking to end strip searches on the basis of welfare. And he said that Greater Manchester Police, he would be advising the Chief Constable to accept recommendations and sending the report to the Home Secretary to suggest that she considers the same recommendations for police nationwide. We're going to step away from that now, and we have some breaking news as the